It is an Aston Martin kind of day, and a very exciting one at that. Something new awaits us at Aston Martin's HQ in Gaydon. Hi guys, I'm Shmee, hello and welcome back to the channel, where today we're going to be heading with one of the Shmeemobile Astons up to the place where they were originally built, the very same place where I experienced joining this car throughout its production process. It's always a special day, but like I say, today there's something that at this point I don't know all that much about, but something I am very keen to share with you shortly. The theme of the day is definitely Aston Martin Vantage. I have two of them in my collection, the OG Shmeemobile up top, the 2009 4.7 litre V8 Vantage Roadster, and then the very last of this body style, the Vantage GT8, limited to 150, a car that really borrowed the learnings from Aston Martin's racing success, something that's becoming even more relevant now. And despite having basically lived at the factory while this was being built, it's actually been back a couple of times, including in 2017 when the number 97 winning 24 Hours of Le Mans GTE Pro car had just returned, the Vantage GT8, and I had this alongside it. That was epic, but because that car's been a few times, I think we should take the original one back to the factory again. So yes, the plan of the day is to take this car. I think I have taken it to the factory before. I have memories of joining a V12 Vantage day out and a factory tour, but I don't have any pictures of it. So we need to fix that. That means we need to pull out the GT8, pull the Vantage Roadster down and get on the road to Aston Martin, where I did in fact take delivery of this very car about 7 years ago. Time absolutely flies. I've been a few times since, but we're bringing the camera along today to go check out something pretty exciting. One at a time then, we need to take this car out the way to bring that one down. You can probably hear a tractor in the background. Obviously we're on a farm and there are lots of tractors around. Anyway, open this up, pull out the cable from here. I did think about taking the GT8 again, but we're gonna leave it here today. So, cold start time, then let's pull it forwards. Having just taken this car all the way up to Scotland and back, it's had a good 1,000-mile plus outing, so I figured that can stay put for the time being. This needs a drive. It's had a couple of shorter 15-minute, 20-minute drives. It's actually just had a full service at the Aston Martin dealer as well. But I want to pull it down and I want to take it and go and properly stretch the legs. It throws back so many memories for me. So let's get this down from the Benpack Auto Stacker. Always got to remember to unlock it. That's the thing I always forget. Anyway, turn this on, up to get it off the stops, and then we'll bring it down to the ground. Look at that thing, what a pretty car. And some of you will remember this. The key has that chip on the end of it. And it's quite funny because when it was at service, obviously this is what the dealers are supposed to do, they noted that that was damaged and asked if I would like a new one. But the fun fact is, when I bought this originally, and it was less than a year old when I first bought it, it already had that chip, and that was always something that I guess was frustrated by at the time, but these are really expensive, like £1,000, and I just rolled with it. So I've rolled with it ever since and left it like that. It's part of the story, the history, the patina of the car in some ways. Anyway, unplug this, drop that back down, and let's go and get this started. This car now has 31,957 miles, and it already had over 31,000 when I bought it back 2.5 years ago now. In fact, coming up towards 3 years since I bought it back, which means I've actually owned it longer in this stint than I did the first time I owned it, and I've done less than 1,000 miles on it. We'll go through 32,000 today. I drove it about 16,000 miles in my first ownership period. But the thing with this generation of Vantage is this played a huge role in saving Aston Martin. The sales of these, the acclaimed reviews that it got, basically everybody loved this car at the time. The NAV8, the looks of it, and it set a real new tone, a new generation of Aston Martin in the early 2000s, something that in recent years I would say has gone a little bit wayward. And what I'm interested to find out today, as you might have guessed, is what the newest one of these is actually like. So we're hopping in to head to Gaydon to go see the brand new Aston Martin Vantage. Let's do it. Let's hop in and hit the road. We are, of course, here in England. So what do you expect other than it being a little bit dreary? It was drizzling a moment ago, but we're pulling out onto the M40 up towards Gaydon. And I tell you what, listen to this. It's still got it, you know. 420 or so horsepower from this thing, the 4.7, which was the facelift Vantage. I mean, this car is now 15 years old. I bought it back in 2010, 14 years ago, well, at the end of 2010, so a little bit over 13 years ago from now. It is crazy that it's still actually a really nice car. You know, this is actually a really, really pleasant thing to drive, and barely costs any more than like a small electric city car does now. Obviously slightly higher running costs, but this was the facelift, the update, the 4.7 that replaced the 400 horsepower 4.3. And one of the biggest changes when they introduced it was actually this new interior. So having this new waterfall, I mean, it replaced the previous one, but big updates in terms of the buttons, the way it's presented, even down to the cup holders, or in this case, Shmoo the cow seats that they changed. Basically this whole new system. And talking updated interiors is obviously a big thing that Aston Martin have been working on recently. You've seen the DB12 replacing the DB11, complete overhaul to the inside, small changes on the outside. You would have the first impression that it's not necessarily a new car, but inside, big changes. And that is a theme for today, I believe. The car that we're going to see is going to have a lot of that infotainment absorbed from the DB12 into the Vantage platform. And the Vantage is such a significant car. It dates back over 70 years, that name badge for Aston Martin. And in fact, the DB5 Vantage 60 or so years ago, the Vantage itself, the first model, was about 5 decades ago. We've got a lot to learn and discover when we get there today, but we're basically cruising. Got an RS4 that just went past, basically up the M40 all the way to Gaydon, enjoying what this car has to offer. And okay, it doesn't have like wireless Android Auto and Bluetooth and stuff like that. You can probably get an attachment that you install, I would imagine, for this and plug it into the armrest or something, but I don't really drive the car often enough. And something that from back at the time I remember, it doesn't have cruise control. The cruise control selectors would be here, but they're a very expensive option to add after the fact because you need a whole new steering wheel. So it's £1,500, £2,000 or something like that for a whole new steering wheel. Maybe it's something down the line to get one that's slightly less shiny, slightly less worn. I don't know. I don't drive the car a whole lot, but if I was going on a big tour, reliving the first road trip vlog I ever did, Adventures in the Shmeemobile, with my friend Alex Smolik many years ago when we drove down the autoroutes of France towards the Riviera, it might be something fun to look into doing beforehand. For now though, it is a bit of a leisurely cruise, not doing anything too crazy. Maybe drop the gears just for one more little bit of V8 sound. So we've got an empty stretch. It sounds really nice. Without going crazy, it's really nice. I love it. The memories come flooding back driving this car. At the bottom of that sign, Aston Martin and Jaguar Land Rover, because this is Gaydon, Warwickshire, which is very much, oh, listen to that, like a heartland of automotive. It's always special to come here. I've been many times to Aston Martin Works, which is where the old Aston Martin factory was up until the earlier Vanquish. That's now obviously about 15 years old as well, a bit more. Time absolutely flies by, but it's always special to come back to this area, especially in an Aston. And as you can tell, it's kind of late in the day. At least the sun is kind of trying to poke through the clouds, but in not too long, we shall be there. See if we can grab a quick photo of this outside the factory, because that's always special as well, to bring it back. I mean, this literally rolled out of the factory doors a long time ago now, and it still feels like a fairly modern car. You know, you drive it for a journey like this, it's comfortable, it's smooth, it's relaxing, and then you get here, pop the window down, and it's still got it, it still sounds good, and it's still a whole lot of fun. This is where we're coming to then, into the gate of Aston Martin. We've got the security office just up ahead of us, where of course, luckily today, the names are on the list, so we can head straight in. But it's exciting to be back. The gates are opening, so through we go, and around towards the main building. I don't think I've actually been here for a good couple of years at this point. In the past, on the rocks, they used to have various cars hanging around, but alas, not at the moment. Obviously, things have changed a fair bit. In fact, if you look over to the building, I don't think it used to have the dark green that it has now. Lots of DBXs around, but let me figure where we can park this, and then excitingly, head on inside. Some very nice cars around. So, yeah, V12s, DB12s, everything. It's looking busy. It's looking busy. We will find somewhere to squeeze in. This is a bit of a personal one. On the day I collected my GT8, it was inside those windows, and we took some photos of it right out here. So to do the same with this car and have that set is quite unique. But what we have come to see is, of course, inside. I think we should probably head straight on in and go and take a look. Welcome to the atrium, and take a look at some of the cars that are on display here in the entrance area, the VIP reception at Aston Martin in Gaydon. And what you've possibly seen in the reflection behind me is the car that we have come to see lurking under a Union Jack flag cover over on that side. But before we get that cover pulled off, a very quick look in here, because if you rewound back to when my generation of the Vantage was introduced, the Aston Martin portfolio at the time had the Vantage, the DB9, along came the 177, all GT cars, whereas now we have not only the new DB12, very much Super GT territory with all of its updates, and we'll take a look at that in a moment, but also, of course, a car that I got to experience recently, the DBX 707, which I got to drive at the Las Vegas Formula One circuit to experience quite how impressively dynamic and capable this is. But not only that, two unbelievable, I'm going to say hypercars. One you are very familiar with, the Aston Martin Valkyrie, the Spider, the open-top version of this unbelievable machine, and next to it, Valor, with its manual gearbox and the V12 engine. But that is, of course, not all. There is a new member of the family, which is the car we're going to be taking a look at over here, the new Vantage. And I want to just give you a sneak peek before we're going to pull this cover off to show it to you in full. Styling cues like the new headlights with this familiar design, big grille, totally new shape and look to it. So let me head round towards the back. Let's get this cover pulled off and present to you the new Aston Martin Vantage. Take a look at this car. It is heavily redone, a completely new model, completely new look. The engine, the 4-litre twin-turbo V8, now makes, get this, 30% more power than before, 665 horsepower, completely new grille with lots more cooling, of course, for the additional power. Totally new look with the new headlights, the styling cues, air curtains design, new wheels, new tyres, new braking system, new mirrors. Inside, I want to show you some of the details here because we also have a completely new interior featuring the latest round of infotainment, new technology, new styling, and lots to talk about when we enter inside the car as well. Around towards the back, familiar design because this was engineered very, very impressively to begin with, but now with quad exhaust tailpipes and a few new aero elements as well. I think we should dive into this in full and explore Aston Martin's new Vantage because there is a lot to show you about this. Let's talk about this then, presented here in Cosmopolitan Yellow. I want to break it down into a few different parts. Firstly, a walk around to talk about the design, the styling, the aerodynamics, and the completely new look of this Vantage model 7 years after its predecessor. Then we'll pop open the bonnet, touch on the engine and the powertrain before diving into the interior to go through all of the new infotainment there. But this is a big, big step. It is a significantly different car to the Vantage as we knew it before. The car that was known as New Vantage, now I suppose technically we have New Vantage. In some ways, of course, the silhouette, the general outline and shape is familiar, but it's changed in proportions. It's actually 30 millimeters wider. But I think the biggest thing that we should focus on is this front end, a big change from what we've seen before. Not only the improved grille for extra cooling and airflow, but also the general styling and design changes. So this is actually 38% larger than before for 29% improved airflow. So of course the blades and the different parts going on inside, including down at the bottom, as it's nicknamed, the piano radiator to help with all of that cooling. Much more, of course, required for the extra power that it now boasts. Wrapping around the base, we have the carbon fiber front splitter, and then these these air curtains, which have a styling design here, reminiscent of that found on the Aston Martin 177, which is one of my favourite cars of all time. Up above, a completely new look thanks to the eyes of the car. The headlights are always one of the first things you see, and one of the things that was most often critiqued about this car's predecessor, but here, fitting in with the new styling, the running lights and these 6 blades that you have up top, and of course being matrix LED, offering all of the latest technology. Now, another big change is that the previous Vantage had a full clam over the front, effectively opening over the top of the headlights, where this reverts to a more traditional bonnet, which, like I say, will open up in a moment. Coming around towards the side, we have 21-inch wheels as standard, wrapped in the Michelin Pilot Sport S5 tyres, along with improved brakes, but a lot happening behind with the suspension and the technologies in the software that we'll touch on in a moment also. As we come down the side, the side strake has returned, familiar from the Vantages that I love so much. I think that is a very welcome design cue. And I also want to touch on the door mirrors, which are actually frameless. These move as you adjust them, the entire top part adjusting to position, which makes the car actually slightly slimmer than it otherwise would be if they're wrapped with cases around them. Coming towards the back here, largely unchanged due to all of the development work that had already gone into the diffuser of the previous Vantage, but we have new tailpipes, the quad exhaust tailpipes, a twin set on each side, and these new kidney grills back here as well to help with the airflow and the cooling, but this design that I've always liked of the tail light that wraps over the top of the Aston Martin badging. Moving to the engine, and there is a figure here which stands out to me in a big way. This car, when compared to its predecessor, boasts an increase in power of 30%. There are not many new generations of a car that will step up that much. So let's get this opened and have a look at the combustion engine. This is all combustion engine, rear driven, as we know from before, the 4-litre twin turbocharged V8. So come and have a look at what we've got under here. It is mounted behind the front axle, so front mid positioned. It's a hot V. You can see the twin turbos sitting right in the center, making 665 metric horsepower, 656 brake horsepower, and 800 newton meters of torque. That means this is up 115 horsepower and 115 newton meters from the previous model. That is big. And this is going to be phenomenal. Of course, there are new adaptive cruise control systems and radar and all sorts of ADAS systems, which increase a little bit of the weight, but we're still talking somewhere in the 20% of power to weight increase from the previous model. To give you some numbers, with the 8-speed ZF automatic gearbox, which now also has a shorter final drive, which will just change the feel of the car a little bit, 0 to 60 miles an hour is 3.4 seconds, 0 to 62 or 100 kilometers an hour, 3.5. The top speed is 202 miles an hour. That's 325 kilometers an hour. This is a seriously quick machine that's also very much about the dynamics, about the drive, the new suspension system, all working together. That's a lot of power, and I can't wait to hear it as well. Moving inside, so if I had the key in my pocket, the handles would now be presenting and automatically pop out, but this is a completely new interior. Everything from the design and the trims and the styling, to the screens, the technology and the controls, to even the steering wheel and the seats that we have within. So there's a lot that we need to go through right now. So starting with these, the carbon fibre shell bucket seats that were first introduced on the V12 Vantage, and now with an evolution in the design for what you see here. If I take a seat inside this car, that's not a bad view in front of me, with the Valkyrie Spider and the Valor just sitting over there. But you can see immediately the new digital screens, but crucially, something I'm a big fan of, retaining some physical buttons. The totally new presentation of this layout, which I'm going to show you through in just a moment. As you start, in front of you, there's a 10.25-inch digital display for the dashboard. We've got the prominent central rev counter, but you can split that and have 2 separate dials with various different bits of information on display up there, with all of your infotainment, of course, controlled by the 10.25-inch screen here, which itself is in a different position to the DB12. It's been brought lower down because of the different seating position within the car, but you can see here your tiles on the main home screen go into the navigation. We are, of course, here at Aston Martin HQ. Go to your drive modes and telemetry, and you have a whole host of different settings and things that you can go through there, which are controlled largely through this. So press the magic button in the middle, it will fire up the V8, or rotate the outer toggle, and this is where you can go from wet mode through individual, sport, sport plus, or into track mode. Now, not only that, but you can also turn off your traction control and use the variable stage settings that you have with the new software. What I like though is having the physical rotaries for controlling your air conditioning, for changing your settings like the exhaust, your suspension, auto stop start, and of course a number of other features, and crucially obviously park, reverse, neutral, drive and manual, without having to fiddle around finding a touchscreen, which is always one of the hardest things. Now this is all new as well. The carbon trim that we have here with these very slender air conditioning vents running across the dashboard, and a big change in the way the lower part of that is presented compared to before. We have our seat controls down here, your electric memory seat controls with your lumbar support toggles as well, and then your heated and ventilated seat controls are up on the top here, easily accessible as well. On the steering wheel, you've got your cruise control and the controls for the screen up in front of you, and the steering wheel mounted shift paddles, of course, for that 8-speed automatic gearbox. We've got a Bowers & Wilkins sound system available. Incredible sound power, 15 speaker system, and that's over the standard 11 speaker system, which is already pretty impressive to begin with. This reminds me of that iconic side strake on the outside for the door handle selector. You can see the speaker grills dotted up around the front, and generally the way that this is presented, the mix of Alcantara, carbon fibre, leather, the contrast stitching that we have in here, and the presentation of the storage area that we have behind, and some cubbies and different storage buckets as well. So there's a lot going on. You've got cup holders, armrest storage, and a completely new style. If you remember how cluttered and fussy it was before, and how the display was basically a smaller tablet just stuck on the top of the dashboard, this is such an improvement to how it's integrated. Of course, I can't speak for the full system until I've been out and driving with it, but effectively the DB12 system that's been brought into this, and a totally new look, which I think is, as I've said already, a massive step forward. It is a big, big improvement, and a very, very nice cabin. If I just close the door to get the feel inside, look at those frameless mirrors. That's something that would take a moment to get used to, but despite the car having very wide arches, being 30 millimeters wider than the previous generation, the mirrors actually have the same complete width because of how they don't have the wide frame around them. So a nice solution akin to what we've seen in recent years on rear view mirrors as well. Big improvements throughout this. You've got your wireless charging pad tucked in underneath, so you can pop some things just in there as well. Lots of storage, again, nicely designed, nicely presented, and just an all-round huge improvement from what came before in the last generation of the Aston Martin Vantage. This is just such a cohesive, pulled together look and feel to it all. I mentioned that there's also a lot going on under the skin, the stuff that you can't necessarily see, the technology and the engineering that are going to make this a very interesting car to drive. So it's got an EDIF, an electronic rear differential, but obviously a lot more power, and a lot more power needs basically everything to improve in line with that for the ultimate experience. And one of the big things is the suspension side of this, and the Bilstein DTX adaptive dampers. Now, they offer 500% of the previous car's dynamic range. So to consider what I think that's going to be like, a very comfortable car when you want a GT cruise, but when you're in track mode, a car that is going to be seriously glued to the tarmac. Of course, the new rubber obviously helping with that as well, but by having that configurability means that the team are able to create a car that is seriously dialed in, seriously honed in, and obviously there's a carbon ceramic brake upgrade option as well. I'm sure you could put some even stickier rubber, but to think about all of these different things and how they're going to come together, the new gearbox configuration, the new software obviously for the engine and the upgrades that have gone into making that possible, the fact that the operating temperature has increased as well to be able to work even better in hot climates and hot environments. This is turning into a package that is certainly going to be quite potent when you start to add all of these different things. Add into that still the variable traction, add in the other different software systems and dynamic modes and individual, which of course you can completely customize, and you're going to be able to have a lot of fun with this thing. I can't be here surrounded by the likes of Valor and the Valkyrie Spider and not take you for a tour of the lineup here in the atrium. We start with the DB12, which I'm actually still yet to drive, but the follow-up to the DB11, slightly confusingly, despite the name, no longer with a V12, but a different derivative of the 4-litre twin-turbo V8, making 680 horsepower. Of course, the ideology of this is very different, the Super GT, and hence quite a different interior, although this is where the introduction of this new generation of technology and infotainment began, with the screens and the controls and the new steering wheel. But as you can see, obviously with the more comfort-orientated seats and focus for being a Grand Tourer. Now, the spec of this car is finished with the bronzed contrast wheels, a colour that's also available on Vantage. But again, a big change when you look at the front end. You can see some familiar character traits up here with the headlights, for example, that have carried through to Vantage as well, keeping that cohesive family feeling, especially with the large front grille, that very familiar iconic shape, but growing, of course, as time goes by, helping with cooling, also distinct identity and design. The DBX 707 at the time was the world's most powerful production SUV from a large-scale manufacturer, and the feeling when you drive this is that you're in a GT or that you're in a almost supercar. It's very, very powerful, very, very potent. Again, the 4-litre twin-turbo V8, but a car that really shrinks down. You feel like you're much closer to the ground than perhaps when you're looking at it, obviously with all the practicalities of an SUV, the 707 having been the follow-up to the DBX that came before. And I wouldn't be surprised if in the not too distant future we'll see that technology gravitating into the DBX lineup as well. But now we get to the seriously special stuff. Valkyrie Spider, the 6.5-litre Cosworth V12 hybrid hypercar. Only 85 Valkyrie Spiders, in addition to the 40 AMR Pros, the track car, and the original 150 Valkyrie Coupes as they were first introduced. This thing is still mind-blowing every time you look at it. The aerodynamics, these Venturi tunnels that run effectively the entire way underneath the car, the aero that's going on around the side, the barge boards and the way it's directed through from around the nose, the exposed components that remind you of Formula One cars, the way the nose hangs down as well. This is really the pinnacle of road-going hypercars and the future, because in 2025 Aston Martin will be returning to Le Mans to race Valkyrie in its new form for the LMP hypercars, which is going to be out of this world. And then something very different in the form of Valor, introduced last year, 2023, at the 110th anniversary of Aston Martin, having been founded back in 1913. There are 110 of these with 715 horsepower from the 5.2-litre twin-turbocharged V12, a development of the engine we know from the V12 Vantage and the DB11, but very different in the case of this because inside you find a manual shifter. Long live the manuals. And I actually have to say, the specification of these seats, looks absolutely marvelous. This heritage throwback style, and a car that I would truly love to experience. I think it looks absolutely wonderful. This retro styling of those 80s edgier design cues, but with a modern V12 technology and experience celebrating a big anniversary for Aston Martin. What a lineup, hey? When you add to those new Vantage, you have hypercar and track hypercar, you have ultimate special, I'm going to say weekend drive, you have practical but still seriously sporty SUV, you have a super GT, and then you have a fun daily track car with a new Vantage to add on to that as well, all presented in this new look here at the Atrium in Gaydon, very different to the last time I came to visit, and all in various different shades. I was going to say green, it is in some ways the Cosmopolitan yellow that's been chosen as the marketing halo launch colour for the latest model to be introduced. Having driven up today in, well, my original Aston Martin, the first Aston Martin I ever owned, a Vantage from another year, from 15 years ago, to see where this has gone and to see the direction of the new car is really quite exciting. All that remains is to actually go and drive this thing, and of course to hear it, because a V8 in 2024 is a wonderful thing. To keep it purely about the drive and to improve the dynamic element of this. And I'm a guy who likes to take cars to the track, to go out and drive, to find a lovely twisty road and to enjoy them. And I suspect everything I know about this on paper is going to make it very much at home in that type of environment. So a very special day to come here to Aston Martin's HQ, to come and visit and to see this, to take a first look at the brand new car and to touch the surface. Of course, there'll be a lot more that I don't yet know about when it comes to this, but I can't wait to find out about in the future when there's an opportunity to get behind the wheel and go and drive it. As a person who has clearly been a big fan of the Vantage model in years past, I'm looking forward to the future and what it's going to be like with this. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this first look at the brand new car. Who knows, maybe one day in the future, we might see one of these in the collection. You never know. That's it for this time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again very soon. Cheers.